Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're doing well watching online. We're streaming today to YouTube as well as I did Periscope. So this might show up on my Twitter feed. We'll see if it actually works this time or not. But it jumped up already like 26 people watching at one point. So welcome everybody. I hope we didn't keep you waiting for too awfully long. How's it going, Andy?
I'm good. How are you, John?
I'm doing pretty good. Just kind of getting up for the morning and getting around, doing a bunch of PowerPoint testing, kind of like in a panic right before this thing starts, make sure things work and buttons didn't randomly disappear, from Microsoft tenants and all that. So
change adoption.
hanging
It's the
in
story
there.
of our life.
Yeah. So I turned the chat overlay on. If you guys are watching at home, let us know in the chat where you're watching from, and it'll display on there. We get an idea of kind of who's in the chat. We definitely want this to be interactive and have it, have a lot of Q&A, a lot of back and forth. If you guys want us to like try something out, what happens if you do this or what happens if you do that, feel free to let us know in the chat. But I'm in Kansas City right now in my house, as always, and curious to see where everybody else is coming from. There's a few chats. We got another person in Charlotte, Brian Scott.
Brian.
Then Dwayne is in Florida, hot and muggy. I think it's going to be hot and muggy today in the Midwest. They're saying late next week it's going to get up close to 100 again, I think. So we got Maryland, Ellicott, Maryland. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, not looking forward to any more hot and muggy days. Looking forward to a little bit cooler weather.
Yeah. Has it been pretty muggy over there in North Carolina?
Oh, yes. Muggy and humid.
Swampy.
Hey, Stephanie.
Yeah.
How are you? I see some of my friends from the Charlotte area popping in. I did a blast for the Charlotte area SharePoint user group. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, welcome, guys. Hopefully we'll have a few Cerner folks on. I just did a all company Yammer post like an hour before this thing. So it's like, hey, 25,000 people, come watch this YouTube video. We'll see how many actually show up, But, I had a nice quiet Friday. So, I was able to jump on and do something. I don't know about anybody else.
Oh, there's another one from Charlotte. A few more.
Awesome.
Hey, Casey.
Thanks for joining us.
Casey works with me.
Awesome.
Yeah, this one should be a lot of fun. I know John spends a ton of time delivering content presentations, much like I do. So we had the idea a couple of weeks ago that we would talk about some of the changes that have been implemented here in Teams as it relates to PowerPoint, because I spend so much time in PowerPoint, and some of these things that Microsoft has introduced here recently are significant game changers for delivering presentations and delivering content and just streamlining your workflow. There's so many workarounds that we've had to do for the last couple of years, and now all of a sudden, like, we've got tools that make that so much simpler. Like, I can build a presentation, drop in essentially anything I want, upload it into my Teams meeting before the meeting actually starts, and then hit the ground running, and not have to do some of these gymnastics to set this up and test it and, make sure the buttons are still in the right place. So this one, I'm looking forward to this one. This one should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's finally time, to talk about PowerPoint Live end to end. A lot of times we were talking before this, like a lot of times I haven't put out videos about like, hey, this new PowerPoint Live, hey, now it's got this one new feature. I've been waiting for like a culmination of good features to like, I feel like maybe PowerPoint Live is out enough now and feature rich enough that it's like, well, let's see what all is there end to end. So we can kind of play with it, and then hopefully some of the small gaps here and there will just get filled in as we go, 6 months, a year from now, or whatever it is.
And there's some things that they've introduced that I think users didn't realize that they wanted, and now they're going to see some of these new features, and they're not going to be able to live without it after they've used it. It really, some of these things are really going to streamline that workflow. It's really exciting stuff, and I can't wait to see what they do next. I know a couple of things. I can't talk about it, but I can't wait to see what they do next.
Yeah, for sure. So to start out, I was thinking maybe we start out from the presenter's perspective and look at, how do we get in and start a PowerPoint live? Where's the button? I've just been screen sharing forever. How do I leverage this new stuff? Where are my files at? How do I get to the slide deck? All that type of stuff. I've got my screen shared. If you want to share yours, who wants to start?
Well, you got yours up and loaded, and
okay. Sounds good. Yeah, let me get Teams up here. So we got
mine's loaded now as well.
I've got Megan Bowen, our friend from Contoso, where we do all of our demos and things like that. We've got Megan. This is a fun opportunity too to do a live stream because I've set up a home lab. I've been inspired by our buddy Steve Goodman over in the UK. He's been building a home lab with repurposed servers. And I thought, well, man, I should do that because then I can not beg my team to join a fake Teams meeting so that I can get screenshots, and be like, is it okay if your face is in a video? Now I've got 7 Contoso people with like stock videos just looping, and we can kind of show off features a little bit easier that way in like a controlled environment, so I don't accidentally like show stuff from my employer, or my employer's logo, stuff like that. So we're going to see if this keeps up. I've got 48 CPUs and I think how much RAM? I got 86 gigs of RAM, so hopefully it'll hold up with everything on this server. But we got Megan. I've created a daily meeting here that we can join that's got like other people invited to it. So I'm going to join Megan to the meeting, and then we're going to make Alex be our attendee. So we'll be able to see the attendee versus the presenter. So she's joining the meeting right now, and then we're going to call Alex in. We can see how to add a PowerPoint. Come on, Teams. The whole window froze. Let's try it from Alex's perspective. We'll just have him join the meeting from his calendar as well. The other thing I'm wondering with this is what will it do to my internet connection to have like a bunch of people all in a Teams meeting on my home internet connection and trying to stream up to YouTube.
We're going to find out, aren't we?
Yeah. Unfortunately, in my new house, I had to give up Google Fiber to move, so I ended up going with Spectrum as the best that I can get right now. So got a 35 meg up connection. All right, so Alex is in the meeting. Megan's getting in there. Looks like Alex reconnected. Cool. So now that we got this meeting going, we should hopefully be able to get to the share tray and all that. Come on. My whole thing's frozen. You want to show from your side?
Yeah,
Andy?
I can. Okay. You can go from mine. So I'm just going to do a meet now, and I'm going to go ahead and join into that.
Mm-hmm.
Get connected real quick. And this is how I test a lot of things. So like I'm connecting in now, but while this loads in the background, you'll notice in this particular channel, I just have a whole bunch of like one-off meetings. So what I essentially do is every single time I need to test for something, I go into just this private team that I have set up and go ahead and just start a meeting. And then from there, I've got another user that I'm running on my other profile. So let me go ahead and just invite this person into the meeting. I'll go ahead and request that they join, and I've got them set up right over here. Go ahead and join in. All right, so that user's now joined in. So this is my student 01. So this is going to be the attendee in the meeting. I just had them join through the web browser so that they could actually view the experience. And then over here, this is me as the actual presenter. So this is what I'm actually going to see whenever I'm getting ready to present. We can see student 1's actually in the meeting. And then from there, it's a matter of just going into the share tray and kicking off the presentation. So I think we were going to start off with what the presenter sees as we're getting ready to dive in. Now, when I typically do this, I use 2 monitors to present. And what I often do is I take this particular screen here, the main meeting window, and I actually put that on my other monitor. And I put that on my other monitor near where my camera is so that I can make eye contact essentially with the camera. But what I'm actually doing is I have I'll turn on the video inside of here. So I'll use the camera that's built in there. So I'll actually turn on that video and I'll move this up to the top of the screen. So I'm looking at the content, but I'm essentially making eye contact with the camera and giving some of that feedback to the users on the other end. Now, one of the things that Microsoft did recently that's kind of subtle that can be a big help with this is actually the gallery at the top. That moves me closer to the top of the window. So now I'm not looking down and you're not looking at the top of my head. I'm looking more toward me and more toward the camera. And then when I move that where my actual camera is on the other monitor, I can continue to make eye contact. But also if anybody else has their camera on and actually running, it's going to show them along this little top bar, this little gallery at the top. So I'm again very close to where the actual webcam is, continuing to make that eye contact throughout. And that's just a small little presenter trick that just kind of learned over the last couple of years delivering thousands of presentations. So I typically have that running over in that other monitor. And then from there, it's just a matter of showing content. And I think we had a checklist, John, some things that we kind of wanted to start off with and then walk through this scenario from there.
Yeah, so we've been doing screen sharing, for years now. And PowerPoint Live is a fairly new feature. How do we get to it from the share tray? You want to show the new share tray? If you're familiar with the share in previous iterations, it used to be that you would click down at the bottom, like what Andy's showing right now, and we would have the tray comes up from the bottom. You've kind of got sections horizontally. In the new iteration of the sharing experience over on Andy's other screen, you'll see that now it comes down from the top. So in the top corner, it's a lot more compact now, and you've got kind of a pop-up window. And you'll see up there at the top, he's got those new sharing, they're called presenter modes, where you could do standout. In the future, you'll be able to do side-by-side or reporter view. And then he's got his screen sharing. Those are up at the top because that's the most common that most people do. But we're hopefully here to convince you that PowerPoint Live is the way to go. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see PowerPoint Live highlighted, and you'll notice that it's showing some of his most recent PowerPoint decks. So the nice thing about this is if you've opened or edited a PowerPoint recently, there's a good chance that that's the one that you're going to be presenting next, right? So it will show intelligently your most recent files. And this matches if you were to go into PowerPoint and hit open and it shows your most recent slide decks, it matches that experience over on that side. So that one, PowerPoint Morphozoom, I think was the name of that file. Yeah, so his open recent, you saw the top file was the same across both. So that's super handy. I also see that Andy has another button that I don't have yet, which is present to Teams. But if you select one of those files, what it's going to do is it's going to render that file for everybody individually in the meeting, which means it's going to be a higher fidelity version of the file. You're not going to have as much aliasing or kind of artifacts around the text on your slide. It's going to be nice and crisp for everybody. And then as you navigate through, it keeps everybody in sync. So that's one way to open up PowerPoint Live. Since I saw that button on your Mac version of PowerPoint, the other way to do this is super cool. This is a brand new feature. I don't have it yet, but it looks like Andy does. You can also click Present to Teams in the top corner of the Mac version of PowerPoint, This is coming to the Windows version of PowerPoint and the web version of PowerPoint. You'll be able to click Present to Teams, and basically it sends a command into your existing Teams meeting to say, this is the file I want you to load up.
And we should point out, while this is actually loading, and the share tray, the presentations that we're seeing here from PowerPoint Live, it does show what we've worked on most recently. But these are things that are uploaded into Microsoft 365. They're coming from OneDrive, SharePoint, and by extension, Microsoft Teams. So this is showing me what I've worked on most recently, but it is loaded into my Microsoft 365 environment. So if I created a PowerPoint and I just saved it local to like my desktop, I'm not necessarily going to see it here. But if I'm working in PowerPoint, like if I've got the PowerPoint app open and I'm working in PowerPoint, I do have on my Mac now, I do have the present and Teams option. So it will take it from the desktop. And then what it's actually doing is uploading it into Microsoft 365, in this particular case, to my OneDrive account. There's also an option here in the share tray. If we scroll down to the very bottom, I can browse my OneDrive, but I can also browse from my computer. And browse from my computer should actually be worded upload from my computer, because I'm uploading from my local computer into that online environment, in this case, OneDrive. And then the presentation is going to load inside of Microsoft Teams. And there's a ton of advantages with this. No, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but like you can see the PowerPoint's already there. It's already loaded. And I did that from the Present from Teams button, but the PowerPoint's already uploaded into into Teams, into the Teams meeting. And then this user over here, they're going to be able to go ahead and see that presentation. It's actually already there. Now, when you first upload, depending on the presentation itself and the content that's in there, it might take a moment or two. So best practice, if you're going to do this in a meeting, log on to the meeting 15 minutes early, upload your deck early, unless it's already saved into OneDrive. That way you can go ahead and upload the deck with everything that's inside of it. We're going to talk about some of the magic that goes on inside of here over the course of like the next hour, but things like animations, animated GIFs, videos, all of that's actually going to play, and it's directly embedded right inside of the presentation in the Teams meeting, and there's no local resources being consumed. So it's going to have a minimal impact on my bandwidth other than uploading the file. So I don't have to worry about network connection, being on Spectrum versus like Google Fiber. Like, you know, I'm going to minimize some of that bandwidth consideration. And then in many cases, it's going to autoplay directly in the presentation. Like this is an animated GIF that's playing on my end from the presenter view, and the user could actually see that on their end as well whenever we're moving through the actual presentation. So it takes advantage of a lot of features.
One question that we got, Andy, is why can't I browse Teams inside of this Teams experience? So you notice that in the share tray, it showed browse OneDrive, but it didn't have browse Teams. This is something that I've noticed, and something I've gotten feedback from users is like, it would be nice if it showed, go ahead and click on browse OneDrive if you don't mind. It would be nice if it showed your Teams as well, so that you could dive into those channels and everything. But if you are editing a file, or you've opened a PowerPoint file recently that is stored on a SharePoint of some sort, it will show still in that recent list. So that's one thing I've noticed. I do probably 80% of my slide decks in a team, because we have like our Microsoft Champions group on Yammer. We do a monthly update series, and I use PowerPoint Live to present that to our champions. We store that on SharePoint. We edit it on SharePoint, and it's always in that recent list. But yeah, you can't really dig into the folders within the channels, because it's your OneDrive that it's showing. One thing I'm curious about, though, I haven't tested this, Andy, is there's the new add shortcut to OneDrive. I wonder if that could be a workaround. If you like add a shortcut to a SharePoint location and it shows in your OneDrive now, I wonder if that would make it so that then you could browse it using that menu, right?
So it's actually
something I'll have to try.
We'll try to break it real quick. So I'm just connecting to one of my SharePoint sites. So I got this business solution workshop site that I work in frequently. So let's go ahead and open that up. And should have some PowerPoints in this document library. Yep. So one of the features John's actually talking about is there's an option to select, is it a add shortcut to OneDrive right up here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me do this. Let me just do new folder real quick.
Dwayne is ahead of us. It looks like he's saying that shortcuts won't show up in that space. That would be a bummer.
All right, so I just added a couple of presentations real quick. I want to see two things. I want to see, I'm uploading these presentations inside of here. I'm actually going to click on one of them while I'm in here. So I'm just opening up generic presentation. I just want to open it for a second. I'm going to go back to my other tab for a moment. And then, so you got up at the top, add shortcut to OneDrive. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that or click on that. I'm going to let that process. So two different things happening. I've uploaded presentation, just editing, and now we're going to add the shortcut back into OneDrive. All right, so I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to return back to my Andy view, which is back here. And I've already got a presentation loaded in here, but I'm going to go back to the share tray, and we're just going to see the share tray actually updates inside of here. Hasn't updated yet. It might take a little while to actually sync over. And then if I browse my OneDrive, I named that one, that shortcut presentations demo. So we'll just head down here and we'll see if it actually shows up. And it's not showing up as Dwayne pointed out. And I've actually got a couple other shortcuts in my OneDrive, and those aren't showing up either. So the add shortcut to OneDrive is not currently a workaround, it would seem.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Dwayne's also saying, check out the browse button on the web browser interface. Like if we go back to the old meeting experience, what does the browse button over there look like?
Which one?
So go back to your browser where you've got that meeting active.
Here?
Yeah, right there. Yeah, try hitting share and then do browse for a file there.
Gotcha. All right, so we got Teams and Channels, OneDrive.
So the web version has more than the app in that one scenario.
Yeah.
Good call, Dwayne. That's interesting. So yeah, if you want to browse Teams and Channels, you can do it in the web version today, but apparently not the desktop app. Hopefully that'll show up in the desktop app at some point.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, because much like you, a lot of my presentations, I might create them and store them initially in my OneDrive, but the final published version, that's actually going to be sent out to like a Microsoft team. We're going to store it in a channel in a team and make it available through there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, my personal feeling about it is the way that I see it is it's a huge chance, huge likelihood that it's a PowerPoint presentation that I had open. So it should show within that list. I think it shows what the top 10, 15 most recent PowerPoint slide decks that you've got. So I haven't had a problem with it. And using the Teams app instead of the web browser, you get these other features like the annotations, showing reactions on the screen, stuff like that, that from my view as a presenter, I probably would still want to use the desktop app for that reason, because annotations are so powerful whenever you're actually delivering the content.
Yeah, if I'm doing a presentation, I'm using the desktop app because of the flexibility to move between content, to do things like you're saying, like the annotations. But for me, a lot of times when I present, and this has been the advice that I've given users over the last couple of years, when I present, typically I show a screen, and I show the screen for a couple of reasons. One, it gives me the ability to show multiple pieces of content. So I'm able to go into my Mac, and I'm able to move very quickly between different pieces of content. You see, I have 2 PowerPoint presentations. I got Teams open over here. I can scroll over to another browser, another window. And so it's really seamless for me to be able to move back and forth versus like sharing a window, stopping the presentation, and then restarting and sharing the next piece of content. So I share desktop, or I use the desktop app mainly because I want the advantages of of being able to do the full screen share. And then there's a couple other minor things that the desktop apps support that I'm a big fan of. I get this full window here when I'm in the desktop app. So like I can see the gallery up at the top and who's in the meeting. I can see my video while I'm still presenting. And then I can see like the presentation that I'm delivering. And, I can see the things that are on my desktop. When you're in the web browser experience, if you were to, like, for example, if this user were to turn on the camera and then try to present, most of the time it turns that camera, like when this user starts presenting, it turns that camera feed off. And so you lose the camera feed while you're presenting. And so like I can't make sure that I'm presenting to the actual camera and continuing to make eye contact there. I'm having to focus in on different areas of the screen. The desktop app keeps the camera actually running for me, which is, for me as a presenter, really helpful. And then, as I've mentioned before, I typically have this pop-out window on my other screen. So I typically move it out of the view so you don't even see it. And then I put it in the other screen so that I'm actually talking to the camera more often than not. And the chat window, I have that open inside of there as well. So those are a couple of things that I find that the desktop app does really well. I've noticed, though, that the web browser is getting better and better with some of that, but it's a web browser, so it's limited in its capabilities versus the full functionality of the desktop app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and one of the new things that you're going to see whenever you do PowerPoint Live as a presenter is that bar across the bottom. That's the annotations area. This is probably there's 2 or 3 things that I'm especially excited about when it comes to PowerPoint Live, and one of these is definitely annotations. I know that since we started using it, I never really used annotations in the PowerPoint app before, even though they've always been available. You could draw on the screen or do a laser pointer on the screen, but for some reason having the toolbar always visible as a presenter makes me want to use that feature. So I've been using it like crazy. But as Andy's demonstrating right there, you can use the pen tool and you can draw on screen. And what's nice about that is it's a persistent drawing. So if you draw or you highlight something, and then if you go forward, and then if you go back, you'll notice that the highlighter or the pen drawing is back on the slide. Like it's still there and visible. So that's a more permanent solution. If you go to, I wonder if it only shows whenever like you're live to presenter area. But what I like using is I like to point to things on screen. And when you're virtual, especially, you don't have the ability to point to a projector, or use a laser pointer on a projector. So I typically will turn on the laser pointer functionality, and then I'll use that to kind of underline things. It's like, here's what I'm talking about on this, or in technical presentations, whenever I'm showing off new features and kind of demonstrating how, this new button or that new button, it's really helpful to have a screenshot in the slide, and then you can point to it with the laser pointer. And one of my favorite things about the laser pointer is, as Andy was demonstrating, is if you move it across the screen, there's a tail to it. And so I've noticed that if you click and hold while you're dragging, that will let it stay longer on screen. Where if you're just moving around on screen without clicking the button, then it's a true pointer like a traditional laser pointer. But because it's digital, you have the ability to show a tail, so you can circle something, and then it will slowly fade away whenever you let go of your mouse cursor there. So personally, I like the laser pointer over everything else.
Should note it works inside of the presentation. If I go to work with some other piece of sharing, it doesn't show up there. I've been using a separate annotation tool to kind of point some things out. Like you might see the little bar pop up at the top. That's a separate tool. It's an app that I got from the Apple App Store called Presently.
Yeah, what is that called? Presently?
Presently, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's just, it allows you can annotate your screen, or you can highlight the cursor, and it's got some keyboard shortcuts to activate. So like I can just highlight the cursor, and then I can do whatever I need with that, and then turn it on and off. But that's a separate tool that works with the desktop. And if I'm sharing like the desktop, it'll show up in the presentation. The tools that we're talking about here they're built into the presenter view as we're actually delivering a presentation.
Yeah, and as Dwayne pointed out here on the screen, you can change colors of the laser pointer, the highlighter, and the pen tool as well. The way that you do that, like if you select the laser pointer there, Andy, you just click it again, and it will come up with a bunch of little dots for different colors. And then with the pen tool, especially, you can even change the thickness. So if you click on that, you can change that slider up at the top and make it a little bit thicker, like a marker versus a pen. With the laser pointer, you have the ability to change the color, but you can't, like change the size of the dot, But that's super handy to have, especially when you're working with like certain colors. You don't want to put obviously an image, because that's inaccessible for people with color.
Your audio dropped off, John. Technical difficulties. Just 1 second. We're going to troubleshoot audio real quick. In the meantime, since I'm still sharing, and hopefully everyone can still hear me, a couple other things to point out as it relates to the presenter mode. This actually gives you the actual presenter view that you typically have in a PowerPoint. Now, if you've delivered a PowerPoint in Microsoft Teams previously, so you got your slide deck and you're ready to go in and you're ready to present, you got the slideshow and you can start from the presenter view from there. But when you do that, it takes you into a full screen mode, and so you lose the ability to see like your Teams meeting, because it takes up both screens on the monitor. And if like you swap this back and forth, users might see the presenter view that you have as the actual presenter versus like the actual PowerPoint presentation that you want to deliver. There's a couple of workarounds. Matt Wade has one on his blog, Jump to 365, where you can go into presenter view, and then you can right click and you can go back into like the slide share view while still keeping the presenter view up. And then you can still have the Teams meeting kind of overlaid on top of that. But it's a workaround. It's not the best experience. So when we're presenting in a meeting now and you upload your slide deck, it takes you into that presenter view where you can see your notes side by side with the presentation. You can see the content down below of what's coming up next. And it's really helpful because you can use that as a way to navigate back and forth through your slide deck. So if you want to move to another part of the slide deck, you just simply click and you can actually move forward to that next part of the slide deck, and then it'll bring that up on the screen. So it gives you kind of the grid-like view if you want to work with that. But there's also a grid built in. And if you don't want to be in the well, let me do the grid view first. So like I've got the slides down at the bottom, but I'm going to go ahead and switch into the grid view. So this brings it up in the true grid view. Now, depending on the size of the presentation, so you'll see all the slides there, and then select the next one, and then you can launch back from there. So you can use the kind of the timeline view down at the bottom, see what's coming up next, or you can switch into that grid view if you need to, and that's super helpful. And notice, the laser pointer is still there. I'm going to go back to my cursor with that. But now we get
Andy, I'm back.
There you are.
Can you hear me? So
Yes.
my headphones died on me, so I had to plug in. And then my 3-year-old just unlocked the door and came in a second ago
wow.
too. So I'm a hot mess
Joys of
today.
presenting live.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, I was just doing a walkthrough of the actual presenter view here and comparing that to the actual the desktop version of it, because this was a recent addition. Within like I think this calendar year is whenever this actually started rolling out. But now you get the full advantages of using that presenter format that many of us are used to inside of PowerPoint. And you can still be inside of Teams without necessarily having to share from your desktop and then doing the workarounds to be able to present and see the Teams meeting and make sure the users are seeing the slide and not seeing your view with the notes and everything.
Yeah, it's so nice to that was the initial release of PowerPoint Live. I think it came out in March, I believe, where you had the ability to see your slide, your notes, and the chat all within the same view. And for everybody who's been presenting during the pandemic for the first 9 months of the pandemic, that was game changing. For a year we struggled to not be able to see the chat, and now just that first edition of PowerPoint Live, being able to see the chat and your notes is super duper helpful.
Yeah, one window for everything.
The way that I typically do, if I know that I'm going to be presenting, is I've kind of got my desk set up to where I've got my presentation screen is over here to the left, and it's a 24-inch 1080p monitor. My useful screen, or my screen that has my notifications, my email, that's a 34-inch ultra wide, so I never share that into a meeting. But with the addition of PowerPoint Live and having those slides and chat next to each other, I ended up buying a teleprompter for my setup. So it's one of those iPad teleprompters from Glide Gear, and I put that in the middle, put my camera behind it, and then what I'm able to do with PowerPoint Live is I can bring up on my iPad's like a third screen basically, and I can put the Teams meeting window there. I see the chat along the side. I see my slide notes, and you'll notice where kind of to the left of Andy's cursor, there's a bigger A and a smaller A. If you're using a tiny little screen and you can't see your slide notes, you can actually at the bottom there increase the size. So I'll kind of blow that up and see the chat next to it. And now I'm reading from my slide notes, just basically reading a script, but I'm looking at the camera, making eye contact with the audience the entire time. And if a chat comes in, I'm able to see that right in front of my camera. So the addition of having just your slide notes and your chat side by side, it caused me to completely reconfigure my desk to kind of work toward that feature. Super handy. It's really added a lot of engagement to presenting, in my opinion.
And you also bring up an important point with different monitors and different resolutions. One of the things that we've had to juggle when we present is making sure that we're presenting from a monitor that maybe is not an ultra widescreen monitor that's not going to display very well for end users that are on a laptop or a tablet or another device that doesn't have a similar resolution. By using things like PowerPoint Live now, we can share from the, upload the PowerPoint inside of there, and it's going to give a resolution for that user specific to the device that they're on, using some of the dynamic view options that they built into PowerPoint now. And so I don't have to worry about, am I on a 1080p monitor? Am I on an ultra wide monitor? What's this going to look like for the user? Am I sharing a window? What's the resolution? I don't have to worry about that anymore. They're going to handle all that on the back end. Now, I still have the concerns when I share a desktop. That's still going to exist. So if I go into a desktop, I'm still going to have those concerns. But I don't have to have the separate monitor off to the side running the 1080 resolution to do that.
Yeah. I got Epoch Cam working. I was kind of showing what that looks like. I get a ton of questions about, desk setup and I bought this fancy ultra wide monitor. It looks so cool, but it's terrible for sharing my content because it's ultra skinny and somebody's in a web version of Teams or they're even in the desktop version. They don't know how to zoom. So that's why I picked up this and have a dedicated 16:9 screen just for screen sharing, and then added this, my teleprompter, for PowerPoint Live. So if I'm doing demos, I'm over here, and you'll see my face kind of turn that way. But if I'm doing PowerPoint, I'm able to look directly into the camera that way. The big thing is I just need to get a 1080p screen instead of an iPad, and then I would be able to like have I could do my demos then from the teleprompter basically, but it's like a 4:3 aspect ratio, so I don't really like to do that if I can get away with it.
So there's an app you might want to check out for the teleprompter, Prompt Smart. They make a iPad and an iPhone version, but they also make a desktop version now. Or I know it's on Mac. I'm pretty sure there's a Windows version as well. And so you can basically run the teleprompter software directly on your monitor, depending on the monitor you're using, and you could like drop that right in the center.
That's a great tool.
The app itself is like super cheap. I want to say it's like less than $20 for a lifetime option. And the cool thing about
iOS, and then on the Mac, it's a subscription. I ended up buying a year of it because I connect my iPad as a Mac display. And then so I did like the subscription model, and it's so useful because I was using it before standalone, and now I can just bring that window over from my Mac, and I've got it mirrored and everything. And what's really powerful about it, I'm sure other apps do this at this point, but it listens to your microphone and then it auto scrolls with the speed. So if you slow down, the scrolling slows down. If you speed up, it jumps faster for you. That's an awesome app. The one thing I have noticed though, Andy, is I tried using this microphone or my lav microphone as the mic that Prompt Smart listens to. And I've noticed, at least in Camtasia, whenever you're trying to do a recording using Prompt Smart, it kind of garbles the audio. It's almost like there's not enough audio bandwidth. So the Camtasia recording kind of gets its audio stolen from it. So what I do personally is I have Prompt Smart set to listen on my MacBook microphone, and then Camtasia is recording my good microphone. That way, I don't have like conflict. I don't know if you've run into that issue or not.
Yeah, I had a similar workaround with that, trying to figure out how to make sure that I was feeding audio directly into the Prompt Smart app versus like audio directly into the application that I'm like recording in, whether it's Camtasia or OBS or Microsoft Teams. I've used USB mics for the most part. I don't have like an XLR mic. I don't have a mixer or anything like that where I can either consolidate or break apart the signal if I need to. So I was running into the same situation. Like, how do I feed, the teleprompter properly, and then how do I feed the recording app properly? We're getting into some complex scenarios within the workflow overall. You don't have to do these things. We're just kind of going through some of the things as presenters that like we've been challenged with over the last couple of years, trying to figure out how to deliver quality presentations and recordings, and then how we can add that value. And I think one of the things John and I were talking about before we actually kicked off the live event was there's a lot of features that are getting put now into this that are making some of this easier for us, so that we don't necessarily have to do some of these workarounds like we're talking about, or add in extra hardware or software into this workflow, and we can kind of simplify it. I think we had a few other things that we wanted to add in as it relates to this particular part, like for some of the presenter stuff. One of the things that should have been obvious from the very beginning, but one of the things we should have done was mention live captioning, turning on live captions for a presentation. So it's going to echo, but now I've got live presentations at the bottom, or live captions within it. And so that's also putting a tag and visually and a name next to the person that's actually speaking in there. And then there's also the new transcription feature. I don't have it here in this particular meeting, but there's live transcripts. So taking all the audio that's coming through in the video and transcribing that and outputting that as a file that you can go download, and you can even edit down the line after the presentation. But with the live captions, you get that at the bottom of the presentation, and so you can see who's speaking, but clearly what they're actually saying as part of that presentation. You'll notice a lot of Microsoft presentations now, they have the live captions turned on automatically whenever they present on stage. And it's a great thing to do so people can read in addition to hear. Maybe they didn't, microphone's not great. Maybe there's a certain accent or, just, background noise that's going on. Using things like the live captions is definitely going to be a great way to add to that presentation as well.
Mm-hmm. Along the lines of accessibility, I think another good thing to talk about is the slide translation feature at this point. This is something that is rolling out right now. So you may or may not have it in your environment, those that are watching, but I found it in my Ring 4 tenant, my Contoso test area. And that is found for both the presenter or the attendees under the little ... menu, like next to the cursor on the annotation thing. You can actually now translate slides. I want to say, if I remember correctly, there's like 18 different languages, 15 or 18 languages initially. And what's awesome is it will translate the text on the slide, because since you're not just screen sharing, it's not just taking anything that comes on the screen. It recognizes separate elements, the images, the background, the text. It can dynamically grab that text, translate it into another language just for that one person. So even the presenter, Andy, he's doing translation on his side. It's only translating for Andy, the presenter. If he goes to the attendee side, it will still be in English. Now, on the flip side, and this doesn't work in the web yet, so you won't be able to demo it, but on the flip side, if you're in the desktop's Teams app, you can click Translate Slides and select, Japanese or German, and it will translate those slides just for you without affecting anybody else in the meeting. That's the second, top 2 or 3 features that I'm really excited about. Annotations, and oh my gosh, we can translate slides now based off of the preference of every individual attendee. It's like that. That's like one of those moments where it's like magic, holy cow, really impressive stuff. But let me know in the chat if you guys have that feature in your environment, if you're following along and testing. Andy has it. I have it in my main environment and my Contoso test environments. So I think it's pretty much rolled out at this point. But that's a super nice accessibility option. The other one that Andy has on his screen right there in the middle is another option that only affects the person who clicks it, not anybody else in the meeting, is you can turn on high contrast mode. So if you've got Louisa Freeze, I follow her on Twitter. She was complaining about, what's up with all these people who use these white backgrounds on all their slide decks. Do you prefer dark mode or light mode when you do PowerPoint? And a lot of people replied to her oh my gosh, it's blinding. Well, if you want in PowerPoint Live, you can now select high contrast mode. It will flip it, and now you've got a black background. You're not burning your eyeballs out, but it doesn't affect anybody else in the meeting. Super cool.
To add to that, one other thing to consider as somebody who wears glasses is the glare that the screens are shining onto my face and to the glasses. So you notice the meeting window is actually in dark mode. Most of my apps are actually in dark mode. I prefer dark mode. But when I present, dark mode isn't for everyone. So this gives some options for users. But if I'm presenting and everything on the screen is white, depending on where that is, some of that might reflect back on my face. And so you might see the screen's reflecting inside of my glasses. I've got 2 key lights up above me, and if I raise my head to a certain level within a presentation, the lights reflect on my glasses and they kind of block out my eyes. So I have them set at a certain level that I know that I'm not going to go to, so that I get the proper lighting on my face. But having a lot of white elements on the screen as well can also reflect back on your glasses. And so going into the high contrast mode can minimize that, but it also can bring your text out, as John was saying. It can make it a little bit more visible for you as the presenter, so you can concentrate on the presentation and not have to squint against a white background versus like black text or whatever. So the high contrast mode is built in. It's really helpful in a number of ways.
On the flip side of that, you were talking about reducing glare on your face. This is a video tip for people who are trying to, record videos at home and do it on a budget. At the beginning of the pandemic, when all these lights were sold out everywhere, one recommendation we've seen is if you want it to shine on your face because you want to improve the quality of how you look on camera, take one of your monitors, like I've got one off to the side, like a 45-degree angle. If you open up Word, just a blank Word document, go full screen, you can actually use this to help you by lighting up your face from a pleasing angle so that you get some depth to your face and you look like a 3D human being. With Word specifically, you can actually change the background of that Word document. So you can make it like more yellow or orange or more white to blue. And you can actually kind of like adjust the color temperature so that you look better on your camera. So where if you're presenting, you may not want it shining off your glasses. If you're doing something where you want to enhance it, you can actually use that to help you too. So that's kind of a little pro tip.
A lot of this, the things like the key lights were sold out for so long, but if you can, if you don't want to do a big key light, one thing I'd recommend picking up is the Aperture MC. This is a miniature kind of LED based light. I got it for like $80 through Amazon, and I know they were out of stock for a little while, but it's got this really cool diffuser on it. It's a silicone diffuser, and it's also got temperature adjustment for the LEDs, so you can change the temperature based off of your skin tone for it. But whenever you light it up, you can also choose the intensity that goes with it. So like this is pretty bright, but like I can put this out of sight and it's diffusing it, and it gives me pretty nice light overall. This is actually a pretty simple and cheap solution. The battery lasts for quite a while. You can also plug it in, and you can see as I'm moving around,
wireless charging on it, which is cool. You can put it on like one of those Qi chargers and it charges it up. This one
is also, it has magnets built into it. So if you have something, metal you want to connect it to, you can do that. And it's got the little 3/8, so you can screw hole so you can connect it into like a tripod or whatever. And there's smaller versions of this that you can connect directly to the laptop. But keep in mind, if you have glasses and you put a light like that directly in front of you, it's going to reflect back out of the glasses. So like, kind of like John was saying, 45 degrees off to the side is definitely something to help. But this was a really cheap solution. And because of that silicone diffuser, it really makes the light so that it's not harsh. And so, I can kind of set it up however I need. This one's also really cool because not only can you change the temperature color, but if you wanted to like do background lighting, somewhere right over there, you can do different atmosphere lighting in the background.
It does little like things like that, fake lightning or like police sirens. It'll be all colorful and do animation.
Yeah, you try to get out of a work meeting, you can do the police one off to the window to the side. Like, oh man, the police are here. I gotta get out. I'll log off and see what's going on in the neighborhood.
I've been wanting one of those Aperture MCs for like a year now. I need to buy one. That'd be really cool for background lighting.
It's really helpful also if like you travel, like I travel, and sometimes I have to deliver a presentation from a hotel room. So just having that with me in my backpack, it doesn't take up a lot of space, and I can make sure that I have decent lighting no matter where I am. I just have to figure out a way to kind of mount it high enough so that it's out of view. So like if I'm at a hotel and there's a desk in front of me, a lot of times they'll have like a cubby hole or maybe a TV or something I can just put it on top of, and I can use that as some key lighting as I'm delivering the presentation.
Yeah, I need to build my like back on the road kit. I need to like leave my cave. The last thing that I was thinking along the sides of presenter features is I've had a lot of questions internally at my organization that are, PowerPoint Live's great, but I switch back and forth between doing a demo in a web browser and then back to slides and then back to a demo. For me, this hasn't been a problem. The way that I handle it is is you can just switch back to desktop and then switch back to PowerPoint Live pretty quickly. So if Andy goes here and shares his screen, you'll notice that he didn't have to stop sharing his PowerPoint in order to share his screen. The shared arrow is still just an arrow. It's not an X. So it gracefully changes from PowerPoint to now you're showing a monitor. And then great, this looks, looks really good. I'm doing my demo. Now, when you go back to PowerPoint, there is a little bit of a blip because you stop sharing. So you would stop sharing your screen, then you go back to the share tray, select that PowerPoint slide deck where you were. And what you'll notice, though, is that PowerPoint Live is smart enough that it will know what slide you were on. So you get that banner right there at the bottom that says resume. Click on that, and it will actually jump to, he was on slide 8 at the time. So that's something, I don't think it was available in March, but it was like a very fast follow that I don't even think got announced. It just started having a resume functionality from my perspective. And that's how I do it. So you do get a little bit of a dropout and come back into PowerPoint when you're done doing your demo. But the fact that you can jump to the slide instead of hunting for the slide smooths that experience out a little bit.
Yeah, that's a lot better than when we had to share, stop sharing, reshare, stop sharing, reshare, and switch back and forth. And that was one of the reasons that I leaned on using the desktop share. But using the desktop share does have its own challenges. With the desktop share, like I'm doing here in the live stream, I can switch between multiple applications quick and easy, but I also have to make sure that I turn off my notifications. I have to make sure that I'm not receiving upcoming appointments. I have to make sure that I'm not getting Teams notifications in the background. I have to make sure that I'm not getting text messages, like my family sends a silly meme. And I don't want, things like that to show up and, cause an issue in the work environment. So you have to make sure that your notifications are set up. And some notifications are persistent. We've all experienced this. You're in a Teams meeting, you're presenting, and you're getting desktop notifications that people are responding in the chat menu to the presentation that you're actually delivering. I'm already in the presentation. Why am I getting notifications in the background? So like we go into Teams and then we find like the meeting or whatever, and then we mute from there, and that minimizes it. But that's just an extra thing that I have to do as part of the presentation. So thankfully, the notifications have gotten a little bit better, and so there's not as many persistent desktop notifications from Outlook and from Teams. But you got to make sure that you go into Do Not Disturb when you're in that desktop presenter view, versus when we're here, like I'm in the presentation, as John just had me walk through in the demo. We can go to a screen. It's a seamless transition, and then it's a little bit of a hiccup to get back to the PowerPoint. I'm sure that's going to be addressed at some point, but it minimizes the back and forth, and I don't have to worry much about system and desktop notifications actually showing up in my presentation. It's the little things.
Yeah, so think of it that way. PowerPoint Live is your shield from accidentally showing your text thread with your significant other to an important client. So I like that. It kind of protects you because you're rendering the PowerPoint locally for each individual attendee. You don't have the risk of something popping up or a crazy sound happening or something like that from your desktop sharing.
There's a couple other things from the presenter view that I just want to point out that I think are kind of pertinent to what we're talking about here. So like, let me go back to the presentation on my desktop for a second. So this is my PowerPoint, and I got two that I'm going to actually show, and then we're going to show the presenter experience with this, but also the end user experience. I'm kind of a PowerPoint nerd. I really like a lot of features that PowerPoint actually has built into it. Things like, for example, Morph. Morph is an amazing transition tool, but you can use Morph to simulate animation in your PowerPoints quick and easy without having to go and build a bunch of custom animations. I've been using Morph for years, and I think a lot of people are starting to use more and more of it. It's really, really powerful. Also, when I do presentations, I like to do rich media. A picture says 1,000 words, but a video says even more of that. So I like to embed short videos, animated GIFs inside of the presentation and use those. And previously with PowerPoint, we've been limited with that. So what I would do when I developed a PowerPoint presentation is I would go into the slideshow view. I'd set up the slideshow, and I would switch it into browse by an individual, the window mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of my presentations are saved like that. So when I go to present, and I'm just going to go full screen with this here. All right, so when I go to present and I'm sharing my screen, you see this presentation. Or if I share a window inside of Teams, you see this presentation. Now, this presentation has a video that's set to autoplay and loop. So you see there's some animation going on, or, you know, as this video is kind of looping through. And I use this for a number of things. This particular screen, I use it based off of a tip from John, but also another colleague of ours, Tracy Vandersnijf, Microsoft MVP. I use this as a welcome screen when I deliver a webinar presentation. It's animated. You can also add audio to it. And so there's movement on the screen when someone logs in. There might be music playing in the background, and you can put text on top of this. And so, you know, we'll start in a couple of minutes. Now, one thing you can't do is a countdown timer on it, but that's a whole other thing. But having the motion and having the audio, when people log in, you don't have to ask the question, you know, has the presentation started? Is my microphone working? Is the presenter sharing anything? It's already there. So I put this at the beginning of a lot of my slides now, or a lot of the presentations that I deliver, so that we can go ahead and address those questions before they're actually asked. So the way that we've done this up until recently is we had to share from the desktop in order to get this. And one of the things about sharing from the desktop is that let's say I share like this and I share this window, and then I go and I want to do something else in the background. Well, when I go and I do that thing that's, you know, in the other slide in the background, a lot of times it'll pause that video whenever, or if that window is being shared. And so like the video won't continue to play. So I have to make sure that this is the main thing that is active on the desktop. So this particular video, I'm going to exit out of here. When I go back into this presentation, and I've uploaded this into my Teams meeting, you can see from the presenter view that the animation is actually playing now. So it's actually built right into the presentation. And that's running in the cloud. That's running from my file being stored in OneDrive directly into Teams. Now, depending on the size of what you're trying to play, there might be some buffering that actually happens with it. I find that once it's actually loaded the video and it's gone through it once or twice, the buffering actually goes away. But now that's actually built into the presentation inside of PowerPoint Live, which is really helpful. And so that's just a small thing for me that I find really helpful. Now,
this is a good time to bring up like that other reason why you want to do PowerPoint Live over screen sharing is that quality. You mentioned that you know, it's going to be choppier if you're doing screen sharing. It plays nice and smooth because it renders the video for the person individually on the attendee side. The reason for that, I wanted to share this resource here. I'll put it in the chat and then I'll show it on screen. The reason for that is the number of hops that you have to make. So this is a little bit of a plug for Microsoft Mechanics. This video is on the Microsoft Mechanics YouTube channel, but also the host of Microsoft Mechanics, Jeremy Chapman. He has just started a YouTube channel that I want to put in the chat for you guys. That he's doing all kinds of like remote presenter or working from home tips and tricks. He just did some on like how to set up your environment for demos. So go subscribe to him after you watch this. But his video, to plug this, he did a great graphic that shows the reason why your video is choppy in any conferencing platform, whether it's Zoom or WebEx. I've tested Zoom, WebEx, Amazon Chime, Microsoft Teams, Skype, and they all have some sort of like the audio disconnecting from the video at some point. And that's because your video source that you're streaming, say you embed like a YouTube video in your slide deck, that has to come down to your computer for playback. And then you're sharing your screen up to the Microsoft Cloud up here. And that's a second hop that it has to do. You have to push that video up on your upload speed. And then you have to rely on the download speed of all of your participants to be able to see that properly without it getting all garbled and you know, pixelated and things like that. So that's the challenge that we're dealing with when you just play a video in a PowerPoint using screen sharing. If you use the PowerPoint Live functionality, you're cutting out 2 of these hops to where the Microsoft Cloud, where the file is stored, that is streaming down to all the participants and the presenter at the same time. So everybody stays in sync. Everybody has a better experience because they're eliminating, 2/3 of the internet traffic. And then I'm not sure how this works, but if you have a YouTube video, what I don't know is the video going to the cloud and then down to the attendees. I think a proper architecture for that would be that the video source itself also streams down. It's just like a placeholder in PowerPoint. So either way, whether it's a hop to the cloud and then down to you, or it's from the source down to you, it's still just one hop for the person at the endpoint. So that kind of helps explain why is video better? Why is it optimized in PowerPoint Live versus just sharing my screen and playing a YouTube video? Yeah, I would encourage you to look at that. I was going to do a demo of this, but because my environment kind of crashed like 1 minute into the live stream, I can't show it. But I can promise you, I would say in my testing of screen sharing versus PowerPoint Live, it's immediate on the PowerPoint Live side, but on like the sync of audio versus video on the screen sharing, it's about maybe 1/3 of a second to a half of a second. It kind of fluctuates for the video and audio getting disconnected from each other, and then now their lips don't match the video that you see. It's optimized for voice more, so it doesn't sound as good when it's coming through screen sharing. So that's just a plug for Jeremy and for the if you put video in your PowerPoint, that's another reason why you want to use PowerPoint Live.
Yeah, I actually have a video embedded in this presentation. I can show both. So like this is a small video here that's playing, and this is actually coming from my local computer. But let me go back into the presenter view, and this is actually a YouTube video that's embedded in the presentation. So our user group had Joanne Klein speak with us recently about SharePoint syntax. And we recorded it and posted it on our YouTube channel, and I put it in the presentation here, and so I can play it from the presentation. And so you can see like my experience, like, so it's loading. I'm going to mute this. So it's loading, the presentation starting, but it's not the highest quality experience as the video's going. And there's a little buffering in there. But this is coming from YouTube into my PowerPoint, and then I'm broadcasting this here back into YouTube Live. We're using the Restream app for this, so we're basically doing the hops like John was just talking about from Jeremy's video. We're coming from the cloud, YouTube, down to my local machine through PowerPoint, and then we're heading back up into the cloud for this particular presentation and delivering this. So from the PowerPoint Live scenario, when we go into our presentation here, and we go back to, here's that same video. So it's in my presentation. And so I'm just going to let that run. And I still have the controls. I can still cycle through it. And it's loading very, very, very quickly. Like there's no buffering inside of here. Joanne is going through, like, whereas it was coming down to my desktop, there was some latency there. There was some buffering as it tried to catch up to that particular area. The quality here is also really, really nice inside of this. So this is what I'm seeing from the presenter side. I'm going to switch over to this person. So here's the video for this particular user. Right away, I can tell the quality is a little bit better. And then going through the presentation, like it's just like a native video in YouTube, but it's in the presentation, and it's interactive for the user. So like I'm this student, I'm moving.
They can go full screen if they want,
Yeah, the controls are built right in, so it's embedded into the presentation. But we've minimized the latency because we've minimized the number of hops that it has to take in order to get to that video. This is significant because when I do trainings, I have animations because animations are a lot easier to create versus listing out a series of steps and screenshots. Here's the animation. You can go here, here, and here and do this. I can do a voiceover with it and drop that little animation in. And if I can drop that in a PowerPoint and deliver it as a part of training, that can make the presentation itself have much more value and more repeatable down the line. But as a user, I can drop in a video or a reference, maybe something that I've done previously, and then you can just go and play it. And because it's playing from the cloud, you get a great experience with that.
And one question that's come up whenever I've talked to people about the video playback scenario is, what about control? You'll notice that, Andy over on the attendee side, he clicked ahead and he was like able to click around in the video. So he's in a different place right now. You're seeing a box on screen. If you go back as a presenter, like say that you play the video, when you hit play, it will play for everybody at the same time. But say that like you get off track, you pause the videos, you're talking about something else, and somebody kind of goes like back in the video, or they go to a different point, but you want to jump everybody to like 30 seconds in the video. As a presenter, when you click the playhead to another place, what it's going to do is it's going to sync that location for all the attendees, even though if they were like watching on their own somewhere else. It will like put them all back on track. You hit play and now everybody's watching together again. So that's a nice thing that works with both like the YouTube live or YouTube embedded videos, as well as if you embed a video file directly in the PowerPoint, you have control over the playback, and I'm going to click play so everybody can watch at the same time. So, there was a question on here from Henry. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but is any idea when PowerPoint Live is coming to GCC? I've been looking on the roadmap and I don't see an item on it for GCC, but
I was going to suggest the roadmap. I don't know when that's going to actually roll out for GCC. I would hope soon, but it's a lot of what we're showing here. It's been GA few months now. Most of it's been available for a few months. I would imagine, and I'm just estimating here, but I would imagine GCC is probably going to be coming in by the end of this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope. So to show you guys the roadmap, this is if you're ever wondering like, what's coming when or what stuff is happening in just the Office 365 experience in general, roadmap.microsoft.com is where you can go. This is just the overall Microsoft 365 roadmap. And you'll notice if you can just search up at the top here for like PowerPoint, but there's like 40 updates right there. So what I use filtering, and this is really helpful. You can filter by the product. So this is just the word PowerPoint across PowerPoint and, Teams, but also Yammer and like all the other different solutions. If you want to, you can narrow that down just to, I want Teams as the platform, but I want the word PowerPoint. So now we've gone from 40 to 8. And then the other thing you can do is cloud instance. So in that one, you could turn on the government clouds and then see like what applies to those environments. So if you got DoD, GCC, and GCC High, say you're just regular GCC, 5 of those updates out of the 8 are relevant to GCC. So it says in here, though, present from PowerPoint to Teams. So that button that Andy showed at the beginning that was like, he clicked it in PowerPoint, it sent it to Teams as PowerPoint Live. That it says is coming to DoD, GCC High, all of the government cloud in August currently. Then these dates are subject to change. You'll notice over time that a lot of times they do change. That's a joke in the Microsoft MVP community that like everything changes and gets pushed out. But on there you can filter by the cloud. Yeah. So yeah, I mean it looks like it's coming, or it's rolling out right now, some of the features. So I mean you have to have the base feature to enhance it. The other thing I noticed like just as like a week ago is you can filter now new and updated features. And this is really handy because it's like, dude, there's like 1,200 items on this roadmap or something like that. You can do what's just new within the last week. And you can see if anything has changed within the last week. So that's a super helpful. I can take off PowerPoint and see, all right, here's everything for Microsoft Teams that has changed in the last week. there's 8 updates that show for that. And then you can reset all of your filters and you're back to 1,500 updates. So yeah, roadmap.microsoft.com, and then use the filters to kind of narrow down what you're looking for. It makes things a lot faster.
And just keep in mind, these are estimates. Dates are subject to change. So it says, it might be rolling out April calendar year 2021. Until you see it in your tenant, it's not in your tenant. So, and even then it might disappear. And not to take anything away from the Microsoft engineers that work very, very hard on all of this, but these are some really complex technologies. And sometimes there's some false starts. They start to roll out a feature, it goes out to a certain group, and then they find out that there's some things they need to go back and readdress. They get really good quality feedback, and they go back and they do make some changes to this. So these are estimates. They're definitely not locked in stone. And if you have the ability to create a test account in your tenant so that you can just test for these features without impacting your actual production, I would definitely recommend that. There's also a public preview that you can sign up for. And that's going to give you early access to some of this, so you can test it out with like an account inside of your tenant. So you can have a preview user at tenant.com and sign them up for that public preview. And will in theory get some of these features, and you can test them out prior to actually delivering the feature to the rest of the environment. And as an admin, there's also a feature where we can slow down the release of some of this. Like we can put everybody on kind of a slow release track so that we have time for it to go GA for some of our users, test with maybe some of the more champions in the organization, some of the more power users, and then we can take those learnings, build out some training initiatives and announcements around that, and then push that out to the rest of the user base. But the roadmap's a great tool in the toolkit, but also make sure you're testing it and using some of those preview accounts so that you really understand the technology before it goes live.
Yeah. So the last things that I had on my list for like how PowerPoint works or cool things in PowerPoint Live within Teams were 2 things: private navigation within PowerPoint Live, as well as clickable links. So the last one is really quick and easy. Another reason why you want to use PowerPoint Live and why it's so awesome is that if you put a link on your slide, like he's got a link right here, like fill out our form and give us feedback. Those are clickable. Again, it's kind of like one of those mind-blowing technology things with like slide translation, because each element renders, independently, and Microsoft can separate those out and change the text language. Likewise, they can make those hot clickable links. So when you click on it, you don't have to paste the link into the chat anymore. So that's a super helpful thing if you're going to put, especially like a feedback form or something like that. Let us know if you want to learn more. Just put it on the slide, use PowerPoint Live, and then people can click on it. What I've noticed though is you do have to remind people to click on it, because everybody they just assume that that's not clickable, and then they ask for the slides later. So over time, you'll have to remind them less and less. But every time I have a link on the screen as a presenter, I always say, by the way, click on that link. It's going to click, and it's like, oh my gosh, like people in the chat are like, holy cow, how do you do that? PowerPoint Live. So clickable links are cool.
It is a little temperamental. Like I clicked on it initially, and then
as a presenter, you're going to go back or forward in the slide.
And you got to make sure like the annotations at the bottom, like I had the eraser continued click there. You got to go back to the cursor, and then when you click on it, it will open that up in that web browser window. So it went ahead and opened that up in the web browser for me there.
Yeah, and I've noticed that works on the browser and the Teams app. At least the feedback I've heard. The other thing is private navigation. I don't know if you can hear my 3-year-olds banging on the door again. But private navigation is kind of one of the classic examples of why PowerPoint Live is awesome. This was actually in Skype for Business as well, where when you share a PowerPoint directly into a meeting, you have the ability to allow the attendees to go forward and back. And that's really helpful for if you're just blowing through slides and you're going really fast, you might leave somebody behind. they can have the power on their side to click the arrows to go back if they want to. And then you as a presenter, you can allow that if it's like, you don't have some big secret reveal, Steve Jobs style, one more thing. But if you do have that secret reveal, you can turn it off as a presenter. And so right now this is enabled for Andy. So he's able to go back as an attendee. And then when you go back, you kind of get lost. That little white button that says to presenter, that will always take you back to where the presenter was. So that's a super handy feature. And if you want to turn it off, right there, his mouse up at the top, you click the little eyeball next to the stop presenting button. And then now that disables those arrows. They'll still see how many slides there are, but they won't be able to navigate those slides. So that's a little tip as a presenter.
There's even a message for the attendee that the sharer has disabled private viewing inside of there. So you can't go through on your own. And then I can go back and turn that on or off as needed.
Yeah.
And the offshoot off of that, something that is kind of related to this, it's actually really helpful, is the handoff. We've delivered PowerPoint presentations where we have other people that are contributing to the presentation. And so typically two scenarios happens. One person drives the presentation and they move through the slides and they just share the one slide deck. And so someone else will talk about a slide and they'll get to the end of the deck or that particular slide and they'll say something like, okay, next slide, please. And so, the user, if they're paying attention on the other side, they'll toggle over to the next slide. Well, now there's the option to go in and take control. So the presentation's loaded here and I need to pass off maybe to another presenter. We can go into the take control option and now this user can cycle through and they can control it on their end and move us through the presentation. And it'll cycle through for everyone. Another user took control. Someone else is now in control of the presentation. And so seamless passing back and forth when you have multiple people set up as presenters inside of that particular meeting.
It's the COVID safe slide advancer. Even in person, you're not handing something back and forth like a slide advancer, and you're certainly not having to say next slide, which looks, super old school. It's like, come on, I'm so tired of hearing next slide from, different executives who don't know about this feature. So being able to pass control back and forth is so nice, especially with the different cadence that different presenters have. They get to be in control if they do that. One thing you want to keep in mind if you're going to use PowerPoint Live and you have like a big audience, it's somewhat formal, is every presenter has the ability to take control. So this is why it's really important, again, to be aware of meeting options. So if Andy clicks his little dots, he can go into the meeting options for this meeting, and then he'll be able to select who's a presenter and who's an attendee. And you definitely want to set that up ahead of time. But if you don't set it up ahead of time, you still can do it later. So right now, this meeting by default is set to like everybody can be a presenter. But he can select specific people and then just give it to the 3 presenters that are in the meeting. And then now everybody else doesn't have the take control button, so they can't take over the slide deck. That's something that you definitely want to be aware of, especially if you're like doing a formal presentation or you're in education. You don't want a student, messing with the slide advancement that's in meeting options. You also, if you have a student kind of going crazy and taking control, just right click, make them an attendee, just like Andy did there. So yeah, that's a really nice feature. That's a lot better than giving control on a slide or on a screen share, because like they kind of have to wiggle their mouse a little bit to take control. Then they can click the slide next. That's why everybody just is reverting back to saying next slide, please, because doing it through screen sharing is just not as good as doing it through PowerPoint Live, where you click a take control button and you definitely have control. Otherwise, you're kind of fighting over the cursor.
Yeah. So. And this helps just so much with multi-people based presentations when you have more than one presenter, and then just being able to seamlessly pass along from one person to another while still being able to take back control whenever it's your turn down the road. It just makes a more seamless transition within the presentation. And for some of us, we're using this tool to deliver town halls. We're using this tool to deliver workshops and conferences and webinars and things where we want to have a more formal presence. And this just allows us some of those tools. Also, and this is a subtle thing, but it's a big thing, is if you're doing things like recording the presentation and then you go back and you're doing post-production on that recording, you're doing some edits on it, this saves a significant amount of editing time, because now we can seamlessly transition from one presenter to another, and we don't have to worry about that dead space in the video and go and cut some of that out later, especially if we practice ahead of time and use some of the tools that are at our disposal. Once you do a few of these and you're working with some other presenters, you're going to really streamline some of the things like your recordings, and post-production is going to be super easy.
That's awesome. There's a cool comment in here from Joe that says the last online Teams conference that he was a part of, they did 140 PowerPoint presentations. And the way that they ran it was they had the facilitator, get in early, start the meeting, right? Load up the PowerPoint file, and then when the presenter's ready to go, all they got to do is click take control and they're off. They don't have to work with the facilitator. Then now the facilitator can focus on the chat, the Q&A. So that's pretty awesome. 140 PowerPoints to run an online conference and using PowerPoint Live for it the whole time.
I don't want to know what that bandwidth bill was like.
Yeah. Or that might be why people are asking about navigating Teams channels and stuff. That would be a situation where it's that's kind of hard, because you're not going to have 140 most recent files on there. So that would be a situation where you'd want to dive into the channel, go find that PowerPoint as a facilitator, load it up. It's kind of an edge case, but I could see it coming up, especially for conferences.
And that comment reminded me of something. I want to point something out. This presentation that I'm delivering and using PowerPoint Live, we're in a channel. This isn't a private meeting. This is a channel meeting. This is supported in both the private meetings and in the channel meetings, the PowerPoint Live features. I'm in a channel delivering this particular meeting right here. And so the PowerPoint Live features are actually running in the channel meeting.
So, Andy, did you have any other features that you had on your list to go through? I've got a list of constructive feedback that I've heard, and we can talk about workarounds and stuff, but that's all I had for new stuff. If we want to go negative for a minute,
I think that's most of the new features that they've rolled out. We've already mentioned, it's limited to mainly just what you worked on recently, provided it's in Microsoft 365. I do know that there are the presenter modes that are starting to roll out now. And this allows you to maybe do an overlay on top of the content that you're presenting. I'm going to show you what happens. So I've got this presentation here live, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to turn on the standout mode for this. And then it's going to ask me, what do you want to share? So, let's try the PowerPoint with with that enabled. And see, it's not letting me switch over into that for the PowerPoint. I'm going to switch my screen over. I'm just going to do let's just do a window, and I'm going to, I'll pull the slide from local. So I'm presenting now, and I have that overlay view. And what the end user is actually seeing whenever I switch over into that window. So I'm essentially on top of this. What the end user is actually seeing when the share comes back up. Hopefully in a minute. I'm stretching my bandwidth.
Work on the web version.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So here's the window for what's actually being presented. So it's me.
Yeah, there you go.
On top of the content. So right now this isn't working for the PowerPoint presentation when it's uploaded inside of Teams through PowerPoint Live, but it does work if I'm doing the presentation on my desktop, and then I want to do me on top of that content. So this is what the end user would actually see, and I get that in a separate window off to the side.
Yeah, that's feedback I've gotten too, is like, when are we going to get standout or side by sides in PowerPoint Live? That's one of those things, like, I've seen it in marketing videos, where like they do like our new vision for Teams, and it's a marketing video that shows PowerPoint Live doing annotations, but the person's in the corner. I will say though, I've searched the roadmap. It's not on the roadmap at this time publicly. So hopefully it's coming along, but I don't know when or if. I've just seen, sizzle reels, things like that. Another thing that I've heard, negative feedback or constructive feedback is kind of twofold. The workaround is the same, in my opinion, with the advice I've given back is, one, my PowerPoint is huge and it takes a long time to load. And that's true. A large file can take a while to render on all these folks' environment, like it loads up in the cloud. And then the other one is, dang it, I wish I could turn off private navigation by default, like a meeting option. The solution ultimately from Microsoft would be, I wish we had the ability either at the user level for like in settings or at the meeting options level to say, don't enable private viewing by default. That way, like, people can't click ahead if you forget. So my workaround or my advice has been the same for both of those situations. It's a good idea, especially if you have a nice formal presentation, get in there early as the organizer or as the presenter. If you join a couple minutes early, or you join, like 5 minutes early, you then have the opportunity to load up the PowerPoint and turn off private viewing. And there's a couple things this does. One, it avoids that big long load time. When people join, it renders the slide quickly for them. The other thing is you have the opportunity to turn off private viewing and make sure that you're stage ready, basically, before other people show up on time. And then the third one is, when people join your meeting, they're not just awkwardly looking at the gallery view as you like scramble to find the PowerPoint. When they join the meeting, they're joining one that is ready for them because it's got the nice title slide. Everybody's where they're going to be. They'll automatically be over on the side or at the top, depending on what their gallery setting is. And you're not changing up the view on them because you're ready to present. So there's a couple benefits to starting early. Just two of those is that you have the opportunity to get rid of two of those pieces of feedback that I've heard. So,
from a change adoption standpoint, this is something that I spend a lot of time talking about. A lot of us, when we create content, we create local on our local operating system. We save local. We save to like our local desktop. We save, to a network drive or whatever. I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of OneDrive. When you create a PowerPoint presentation, one of the options that you have is to save to the cloud. You can save to OneDrive directly. And I know there are those of us that we want peace of mind. Maybe we want to make sure we have a copy of the file local. We also want to make sure that we have it available, even if we don't necessarily have an internet connection. So I would strongly recommend that you take advantage of the OneDrive Sync client. The OneDrive Sync client will allow you to work local. It'll give you a local folder on your local operating system. You can upload content in there, and it'll sync it to the cloud automatically. Any changes you make local, sync to the cloud. Any changes you make in the cloud will sync back down to your operating system. So take advantage of the OneDrive Sync client and work from there. And you'll have the added advantage when you go into that or to deliver that presentation. It's going to show up in this window right over here in the share tray whenever you're ready to share. And that'll minimize some of the upload time prior to the delivering the presentation. But as John said, get in there early, set up the PowerPoint early. And if you've already got it saved in the cloud, that's just one less step that you have to do before you actually deliver the presentation. Also, you get the added advantage of, if it's in OneDrive, then you can access it from anywhere, any device. True story. A couple of years ago, I had to deliver a training here in the Charlotte area. I left my house in Huntersville and dropped my kid off at daycare and drove to the training center, about an hour round trip or hour door to door to get there. I got to the training center, opened my car door, went to grab my backpack. My backpack's nowhere to be found. I left it at the house because I was chasing a 2-year-old at the time, trying to, wrangle him and get him fed and get him into the car to get him to daycare. I got all the way to the training center, and it's a 45-minute trip for me to get back to my house. and then, a 45-minute trip back to the training center, hour and a half wasn't going to work. So I had it in OneDrive. I logged on, pulled down my presentation from OneDrive, delivered it, did the training for the day, and it was a seamless experience. So that's the extra added benefit. Take advantage of these cloud technologies. It allows you to work wherever you are. One other thing to add to that, a lot of times I'll go through a deck, and then based off of like feedback that I get from the class, I'll make a change that over the lunch break. I don't necessarily want to lug my computer to lunch with me. So I can pull PowerPoint up on my mobile app because it's in OneDrive, and I can make the change right there on my smartphone, while I'm eating a burger at lunch, and then I can head back and, I've got the updated deck whenever I get back to the training facility. And that's another feature that I want to mention. I'm delivering this presentation live right here. And I don't do small presentations. Like a lot of my decks are 100 plus slides, 350 slides, or, a gig in size or whatever. But I'm delivering this. As I'm delivering this, another feature that we now have is the ability for another presenter to go into that same deck, and they can make changes to the deck while I'm presenting, so that they can update maybe their section, or they can update based off of something that I've done, and that'll show up whenever we get to that part of the presentation. It's co-authoring while you're actually presenting. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another piece of feedback that I've gotten is, if there's people from Microsoft watching, I have not found a good workaround for this, but a complaint I've heard is full screen still has wasted space quite a bit. I've heard this a lot from our production team, but also from like an accessibility perspective. One, we got to get people to stop, making slides that are so packed with text that it's got to be like 10-point font. But from an accessibility perspective, if you can't go actually full screen, it's hard for some people to be able to see the text on the screen. What I mean by that, Andy, if you flip over to student number 1 and like take control. Yeah, take control, and then now this person's in charge. Then if he flips back over to the desktop app, now you're just viewing as like a viewer. You have the ability to make this a little bit bigger. So like he can close his participant pane along the side. He can go into the ... dots, and he can turn off live captions. He can also click the full screen mode, which is going to basically get rid of his taskbar. So I click on the ... dots. Yeah, so that went into full screen mode. Click the ... dots again. You can even go into focus mode as well. And like that also gets rid of the thumbnails. But see, there's still kind of some gray area along the bottom, the top. You still have your taskbar. What I've heard is people wish that would like slide up, so then they could slide down. But the complaint that I've heard is that like there's still space being taken up by that. So that would be something, feedback from Microsoft. It'd be nice if with PowerPoint, if the person could truly go just full screen and see nothing but slide, that would be beneficial to help out their workaround. For the second and the last piece of feedback I've gotten that's constructive is it's not available as an NDI source. So to get into kind of deep live event production stuff, Teams NDI, I've made videos about Teams NDI. I'm a big fan of the ability to split up the meeting and then do an encoder. Your screen or together mode or the gallery, that is a source in NDI. So you can take that screen, and no matter who screen shares, it will be in your encoder like OBS Studio. But what you'll notice if you're a live event production team, the PowerPoint Live is not a source in there. So the workaround that I've seen from my production team is they will capture the window and then they'll crop around the PowerPoint Live. That's one of the reasons why they want a true full screen, is so that they can just capture a whole display. But again, also, if Microsoft is listening, if this could be an NDI source, then they would be able to directly put it into their encoder and have the same qualities. If it was, in a meeting, you'd get that low aliasing, the better text graphic, rendering, all of that stuff, if it was an NDI source. So those are just a couple things I've heard from my users. I don't know what you've heard out there, Andy. You'd probably talk to more people who get exposed to PowerPoint Live than I do on a daily basis.
Well, one of the questions in the chat window here actually deals with the recording of the PowerPoint Live being better, and that's to your point. If it were a separate channel, essentially inside of the meeting, and we could get a higher quality recording of that out of the meeting, that would be very nice. I know that also kind of overlaps a little bit with some feedback that I've seen around Microsoft Whiteboard. If you're in a presentation and you go into your share tray and you go to present Whiteboard, unless it's changed here in the last couple of months, Whiteboard doesn't record as part of the meeting recording. It doesn't actually capture the Whiteboard screen, but it's been stated that that's on the roadmap, and that's something that they want to address. I think PowerPoint kind of fits into that. The recording's not the highest quality recording, so having a separate channel around that would definitely be helpful, because that would help me in post-production. If I had that separate video to be able to go back and, edit, or just have the high quality video of just the presentation itself to pull out and then, go back and piece it together in whatever editing software that I want, that would be helpful. But I think for many users, that's a smaller user base that are actually doing that kind of work versus like the everyday team that's getting out there and just delivering, a meeting. Here's the presentation, the recording, and then dropping it in. Now, I will say the recording that I showed a little while ago from Joanne Klein, we did that as a Teams meeting. She uploaded in from her end, I believe, PowerPoint Live and delivered it from there. And the last couple meetings we've done for our Charlotte area SharePoint user group, we've done it as Teams meetings and uploaded, and we've had a pretty good experience with that. The recordings have come through pretty clear on the YouTube recordings that we've uploaded, so it's definitely getting better. But having a separate channel post production would be huge.
Well, and soon you'll be able to, I think next month is what they're targeting on the roadmap. Soon you'll actually be able to stream that Teams meeting of your user group directly to YouTube live if you want to. And then you wouldn't have to worry about uploading it later or things like that. It'll just be a live event. So like you get your audience in YouTube and your audience on Microsoft Teams for the user group. And then when you click in stream, it's just on YouTube now. So that's going to be an exciting feature that I'm looking forward to, is RTMP out. Another gripe that I've heard along those lines of like recording personally is the presenter modes also do not render in the recording. So that's one thing that you want to keep in mind if you like do the standout mode or the upcoming side by side. In the recording, it's not going to record that fancy side by side or that fancy standout mode. It's instead going to have the ribbon across the bottom with all the people's thumbnails, and it will be you with a black background. So you'll be cut out, but you'll be on a black background instead. That's one thing. One of our culture teams, they do a big DevCon conference. They're looking for like, how in the world do we get 150 people to record their sessions, make it look good and branded? And they were hopeful that like side by side or standout would allow for that recording, like put yourself in standout mode, record your presentation and send it to us. Unfortunately, it's just a Teams meeting with you as a black background. So another thing I hope Microsoft improves in the future.
Yeah. Couple of questions out there in the chat window from our friend in the community, Matt Wade. So first one is dealing with is the PowerPoint pulling live, or is it pulling by what it gets whenever you click present? If I'm not mistaken, it's
I
live.
Haven't tried yet.
Yeah, it's pulling live with the co-presenter. Now, I could be wrong, but in the testing and the release announcements around this, it's pulling live from your OneDrive.
Yeah, it's something I'll have to try when I get my hypervisor working again. I'm like dead in the water. Yeah, that's a good question, Matt. I don't know, Andy, if you're able to like change those colors or anything if you've got the file open, but
give me 1 second
to see if it works live.
So this is the presentation.
Trying to break stuff. I wonder too if there would be any difference going from clicking the share tray and clicking the file versus you've got the file open and you hit present in Teams. So you were sending an alert to Teams to use PowerPoint Live for this particular file. Um,
All right, so I just sent a link to that user. All right, this is the slide. So let me go to that user. All right, here's the presentation. I'm just going to head to that same slide. Make sure we're on 33. All right.
mm-hmm.
All right, that's
Yeah,
saved.
another element. It says saved up at the top corner.
So let me go back.
No, at least not yet.
Yeah, not yet. We'll give it a second.
Yeah, we may give it a second. We can talk about the second question that Matt has, which is, has Microsoft actually stated how much less bandwidth a PowerPoint Live is versus screen sharing? That's a good question. I'm not particularly sure, but I'll Google here real quick. I know there's stuff out there for, about how much bandwidth is required. Yeah, so this is their document on preparing your network. It was updated 7/13/2021. That's pretty recent, actually. So if we go to bandwidth requirements, we've got audio, video. So screen sharing, they're saying kilobits per sec or kilobytes per second, because it's a capital B. They're saying for screen sharing in a meeting, you should have, they want you to have basically 2.5 meg. But 250 is the minimum. It's best if you can do 4 meg. But they don't have PowerPoint as its own thing here. They just have screen sharing, and then they go on to together mode. I wonder if PowerPoint, yeah, it's not found on that document at all. So no, at least in this document, I haven't seen that. I wonder if there's like Microsoft Teams, PowerPoint, Live, bandwidth. We're going to find is it like Matt has a blog post on his website talking about it because he did a bunch of testing or something. Yeah, I don't know if I like make it require the word bandwidth. There's save bandwidth in a Microsoft Teams meeting. That's a YouTube video. Teams bandwidth required. This is from, that's April 2020. So that predates the PowerPoint Live feature, at least the speaker notes, the presenter view. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. I guess a good test, Matt, maybe this would be a video I could make sometime, is I might have to test it in my virtual environment and monitor the bandwidth for my using my Unify network. And I can probably do like screen sharing, let that run, do a bunch of tests, maybe like showing video, showing static images, and then switch to PowerPoint Live, measure that, and then maybe overlay the graphs on top of each other, at least as like a real world example. Wouldn't be Microsoft's stance, but it'd be a, regardless of what Microsoft says, here's how it actually works. Can I tank my Spectrum internet with screen sharing? But that's a good question.
Hey, so I just got an answer to that, the question about the live updates.
Mm-hmm.
So this was April of last year of 2020. Go away. Why are you? I'm not going to touch that. So there's an option underneath slideshow, keep slides updated, and that's going to allow you to make changes while you're in the presentation, and the changes should push out. Oh. I'm not seeing that on my Mac. So I'm in slideshow.
So it might be like a Windows feature.
That might be a Windows specific feature. So I'm not seeing that here. But for those of you on Windows devices, check the box to see if the keep slides updated. And that should allow you to make your changes, or have someone else make changes to the presentation while you're delivering it and have those show up.
I just wrote down both of those tests. I want to test the bandwidth, and I want to test if I go into my Windows environment, my virtual Windows, and see if I can change the slide while updating. Matt Wade says we demand a deep dive into bandwidth. Yeah, maybe I'll make like a super long video showing all that. Joe Gasper, I think because you sent a link, maybe Joe, I don't see the link that you sent, but it says on here like want to save 90% network bandwidth. If you Googled that, Joe, or if you Binged it, let me know in the chat, like what were your search terms? If I can find that link, then I'll throw it in the chat too. Viewers on YouTube, it like scrubs the links out for some reason. So, well, probably for good reason, because people send horrible things in YouTube live streams, I bet, but not our channel or our community here.
So I just checked my Windows VM, and in PowerPoint, the keep slide updated option is available there. So that is a Windows feature.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't know about that checkbox. That's cool. Okay, so it was a Microsoft Mechanics. Again, plugging Jeremy Chapman. Go subscribe to his channel. Yeah, so save bandwidth in Microsoft Teams meetings using. Oh, so that was this YouTube. I was hesitant to play it because I didn't know what was going to show up when I click the link. So we got old Jeremy here. Yeah, so he's apparently saying in there. There you go, Matt. See, I don't have to make a video, but maybe I should, because then I can show off my Unify stuff. But he's showing the internet tab on his resource monitor, the network stats, to see what it looks like one versus the other. So, and again, this was a year ago, almost a year and a half ago. So maybe it's time for us to do like a updated test on this, but I'll just listen and hear myself. So he's doing PowerPoint live. Earlier, this is him sharing his screen, right? Yeah, because I see like his taskbar in there. So what were those stats? It was like, yeah, so you got like 50 and like 1.5 up. It's very nice. Oh, there's the network activity. It's like 4 meg, it dropped down to 2. Well, now it's like showing 15 kilobytes or kilobits per second. So there you go. Yeah, he's sitting at like double digit, maybe going into like 500 kilobits per second, where before he was at, what was it before? 500. There's 1100 kilobits per second. So it's hanging in like the couple hundred versus like 20 or 30 looked like kind of was the average. It was bumping up to like 100 or 200 or 500, but just for a little bit. This was like starting at 400 and then going up to like 1100. So, but yeah, all right, we'll do a test. I'll do a test and see with my environment, and I'll probably have to record it because I don't know what happened with live, my RDP not working. I guess maybe all my resources are going to the restream so that I look good on this. But yeah, so thanks for that link, Joe. So yeah, that's true, Matt. This was before the modern meeting experience. So this was before pop-out meetings. So that's another reason to redo it. Cool. Another missing link is this: reduce the file size of your PowerPoint presentations. Yeah, so that's another one that's a helpful doc. PowerPoint presentations.
I refreshed that PowerPoint. I just stopped sharing and reshared, and then it showed up on my screen on the Mac.
Okay, yeah. So you had to stop and start again.
Yeah.
Did it do the
I'm gonna go back
resume
and
since there was changes? Like,
what's that?
Did it say, do you want to resume where you were?
Yeah, it gave me the option to resume and pick back up, and then the change that I made finally showed up.
Here's that link that Joe was talking about that's on screen, is reduce the file size of your PowerPoint presentations. Let me paste this in the chat so other people have it. So this link is from Microsoft support, and this is just some tactics that you can use to shrink down that file size and make it upload and render faster for you whenever you're using PowerPoint Live. So yeah, reduce the character sets, some best practices for dealing with images and stuff like that. So thanks for that link, Joe. So yeah, I think we got a few more tests now to take away with this. Did you have any other ideas, Andy? Never really know how to land one of these things, right?
No, this has actually been really good. I can't think of anything off the top of my head other than now I want to go back and play with the live updating presentations and the nuances there. Definitely looks like it's coming from the Windows machine. But I hope that beyond just like, uploading a PowerPoint inside of, Teams and delivering a presentation, like, I really hope that everybody who's been here, we've had a pretty steady audience this entire time. So thank you all for joining in. Yeah. But I just hope you realize that, like, this is way more powerful than it appears on the surface. It's like, oh, let me go to the share tray and, just upload this PowerPoint. And there's so much more going on there. And these are so many things that we've done workarounds for the last couple of years. And now it's really democratizing these features to the average end user and making it a lot more accessible to be able to deliver a really high quality presentation and really minimize the amount of work that you have to do to put into it. You're minimizing the workflow overall. Create your presentation, upload it into OneDrive, start your meeting early, go ahead and upload the presentation, use the annotation tools that are built in. Feel free to put in videos and GIFs and links and make it interactive so that you avoid that death by PowerPoint. And you don't bore your users to death, and you can really create some really quality presentations. And then just some of the extra stuff that they're doing with this, the accessibility features, making it so that everybody can participate, being able to hopefully do the live updates, with the slides with another user coming up, seamlessly transition between presenters, take control. There's a lot to really unpack. I geek out on this stuff, so being able to do this live, this was a lot of fun for me. But I hope that everybody takes away something that you can do to increase the workflow or streamline your workflow, really, just to make things a lot easier for yourself in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. So awesome, man. Well, thanks for hanging out and doing this with me. I really appreciate you reaching out and encouraging me to, like, let's do a live stream again, because I'm kind of in a creative funk right now of, like, not feeling very motivated to make videos and just getting, like, caught up in the daily day job overwhelmed feeling, so
yeah.
I appreciate you reaching out, and this was a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody who was watching, especially for your comments and your chat along the way. It's really energized me and made me excited to go check out other things. I'm walking away with a few more things I want to test out. I'm going to go get Presently, so every time I talk to you, Andy, I hear about a new cool thing that I need to check out. Now I got to buy an aperture light and I got to get Presently because I've wanted an aperture light for a while. But
yeah, that aperture light's really helpful.
Yeah, that's pretty rad. So thanks again, man. I appreciate it. And everybody who's watching, I hope you have a great weekend and stay safe. COVID's making a resurgence again. Just don't be dumb. Is what I could say about that. I hope that you're all staying safe and that you're all getting along, and appreciate your time hanging out with us. So take care, everybody.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.